Today, I want to take you on an incredible journey. We're going to follow in the footsteps of Alfred Russel Wallace, a man who spent 8 years in the stunningly beautiful but also incredibly dangerous islands of the Malay archipelago. It's a real story of adventure, of unbelievable hardship, and ultimately of a scientific breakthrough that would change how we see the world forever. And the best part? We're getting this story straight from the source. Our guide for this whole explainer is Wallace's own book, The Malay Archipelago. We're going to be using his own words, his own data, and even the illustrations from the original publication to see this amazing world exactly as he did. So here's our plan, our explorer's log, if you will. We'll start with his arrival in a land literally made of fire and volcanoes. Then we'll head into the jungles of Borneo with him. We'll look at the brutal hardships that somehow fueled his genius, see nature's incredible mimics through his eyes, join him on his obsessive quest for the birds of paradise, and then finally, we'll unpack the incredible legacy of it all. Okay, first things first, we have to understand just what kind of place Wallace was heading into. This wasn't some gentle, rolling European countryside. This was a world that was still being actively created, a chain of islands forged, quite literally, in fire. You can hear it right there in his own words. The ground itself was not stable. He describes a place where volcanoes erupted so often that the local people used the eruptions to mark the passing of the seasons. Earthquakes were a constant background hum, a regular reminder that you were standing on an immensely powerful and unpredictable piece of the planet. This isn't just a setting for his story, it's an active, dangerous character in it. So what was the big mystery that drew him here? Well, it all comes down to a field called biogeography. He was obsessed with a simple question. Why do different islands have different animals? He started to notice a pattern. Take Britain and Europe. They're separated by a shallow sea, and they share most of the same species. But then look at Madagascar in Africa. They're separated by a really deep ocean channel, and Madagascar's wildlife is, well, it's a world of its own. He suspected these deep channels were the key, marking ancient, impassable boundaries. All right, let's zoom in on his time in Borneo. This is an island that gave him some of his most unforgettable encounters, not just with animals, but with people too. And the undisputed king of the forest was the orangutan, or Mias as he called it. His accounts of hunting them are just absolutely thrilling. He describes shooting a huge male, and even though it was horribly wounded, we're talking broken legs, a shattered spine, it still had the incredible strength to climb high into a tree and build a nest for itself to die in. Studying these powerful, solitary creatures was absolutely essential for him to understand our own place in the grand scheme of things. But hey, it wasn't all just dangerous hunts. It was also a journey of the senses. Take the notorious durian fruit, the one that smells so bad. Well, Wallace describes the taste as a rich butter-like custard with notes of cream cheese, onion sauce, and sherry. I mean, what a combo. For him, tasting this for the first time was a moment so perfect, so utterly unique, that it alone was worth the entire trip. But Wallace knew that Borneo was more than just its plants and animals. He spent a lot of time living among the local Dayak people, who, back in Europe, were mostly known for one thing, being headhunters. But what Wallace found when he lived with them was a story that went so much deeper than that stereotype. And this is a really important point. This was an era when most Europeans just wrote off other cultures as savages. Wallace did the opposite. He watched, he listened, and he came to the conclusion that the Dayaks were, in his words, truthful and honest to a remarkable degree. He noticed that if a Dayak man didn't know the answer to a question, he'd just say, "I don't know," instead of making something up. This kind of deep, ethnographic respect was pretty radical for a 19th century European scientist. Which brings us to the real heart of Wallace's genius. You see, this journey wasn't some comfortable, well-funded expedition. It was defined by constant, grueling physical suffering. And yet somehow, that suffering seemed to make his mind even sharper. So if you're picturing a romantic naturalist's camp, yeah, just throw that image right out. Wallace describes his home base as a single, tiny room. That was it. That's where he ate, where he slept, and where he did all of his delicate scientific work. Ants were everywhere, all the time. His only furniture was a box that he used as a table for eating and for skinning birds. The paradise he was there to document was right outside the door of his own personal, ant-infested version of hell. And this table really shows you the central paradox of his whole journey. I mean, look at this. His body was constantly failing him. He was hit with crippling bouts of malaria, dysentery, and agonizing ulcers on his feet that often left him totally bedridden. And yet, it was in those exact moments, lying in his hut, bringing up with fever, that his mind did its most brilliant work. That's when he was piecing it all together, formulating the theory of evolution by natural selection. And even when he was sick, he was unbelievably methodical. Look at this chart of his moth captures. He wasn't just grabbing whatever he could find, he was recording everything. He notes that on a dark, windy night, he'd catch around 200 moths. But on a beautiful, clear, moonlit night, he'd get 2. Just 2. This wasn't a hobby. This was a systematic, data-driven investigation into how nature actually works. And all this careful observation started to reveal some of nature's most spectacular tricks. He began finding insects that were not at all what they seemed to be, and these little deceptions were major clues for the massive theory that was taking shape in his mind. Okay, look at this. This is so cool. On the left, you have a butterfly called Papilio memnon. Now, what's wild is that the females come in a few different visual styles, and one of those styles has evolved to look exactly like the butterfly on the right, the Papilio coon. Why? Because birds hate the taste of the Papilio coon. So by looking like it, the mimics get a free pass. They survive. For Wallace, this wasn't just a neat little trick. This was natural selection in action, right in front of him. And then there was this absolute master of disguise, the leaf butterfly. He said that when it was flying, it was this flash of brilliant purple and orange. But then it would just vanish. He'd chase it, it would land among some dead leaves, and gone. It took him forever to finally catch one at rest and realize its secret. When its wings are closed, it looks exactly like a dead leaf, right down to the stem and veins. It was a deception so perfect, he wrote, it could fool you even when you were staring right at it. Now, all this incredible work, all the hardship, all the meticulous collecting, it was all building towards a single burning obsession. Wallace's ultimate prize, the holy grail he was searching for, were the most legendary and beautiful creatures on Earth, the birds of paradise. And you can just feel the raw anguish in his words here. He finally makes it to New Guinea, the home of these birds, but he's struck down by fever again and a terrible ulcer on his foot. He's trapped in his hut, a prisoner. He can hear new birds calling from the forest. His helpers bring back amazing new insects, but he can't go out. For a naturalist, this was a special kind of torture. And then, finally, a breakthrough. After weeks of nothing, he successfully shoots his first bird of paradise. You can practically hear the relief and the sheer wonder in his voice as he describes its vibrant crimson feathers and those 2 impossibly long, wire-like tail plumes. This single moment, this was the reward for years of draining and months of painful, miserable frustration. And once he found that first one, it was like the floodgates opened. He started discovering one unbelievable species after another. The superb bird of paradise with that bizarre electric blue breast shield. Then a brand new species he discovered himself, the six-shafted, with these delicate wires coming off its head. And the long-tailed bird of paradise, a magnificent creature almost 4 feet long. Each one was more fantastical, more otherworldly than the last. So, after all of that, what does it all add up to? How does this one guy's grueling 8-year adventure in a forgotten corner of the world end up changing our entire understanding of life itself? Well, he put all the pieces together. From the way animals were distributed across islands to the way butterflies copied each other, Wallace arrived at a truly revolutionary idea. He realized life wasn't fixed, it changed. He argued that things like animal instincts weren't just set in stone. They were shaped over vast amounts of time by variation and natural selection. And then, in a flash of insight during one of his malaria fevers, he figured out the whole mechanism, the very same idea of evolution that Charles Darwin had been quietly working on for years back in England. Wallace got there all on his own. Just think about those numbers for a second. 8 years, 14,000 miles of travel, mostly by foot or small boat, and over 125,000 specimens collected. It really leaves you with one final, powerful question, doesn't it? It just goes to show how a single person, driven by relentless curiosity, even while battling sickness and total isolation, can look closely at the world and uncover a truth so profound it changes everything.